Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis, a podcast dedicated to the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case. Join us as we seek the truth and travel the long road to justice. What's going on, everybody? I'm Gigi.
I'm Fruit Loop.
Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. We have been reading the custody battle documents between Joseph Ryan and Lori Vallow. And before we get started, we want to give a shout out to Wicked Truths and F-Bombs. They are the ones who acquired these papers, and there are over 1,700 pages of legal documents spanning years.
Yeah, a ton of work by these ladies to put all this together and to get these documents.
Yeah, so we're grateful, and it's given us a whole new insight into the early days of Lori Vallow, way before she met Chad Daybell.
Yeah, it's some crazy stuff in these documents.
Yeah, and so we're going to eat our words and say that we've echoed what other people have said in the past, which is that Lori Vallow was the perfect mom before she met before she met Chad Daybell. But I think it's safe to say, after looking through this stuff, she was quite the manipulator with little regard for her kids as early as 2007.
Yeah, it's pretty sickening to see how she manipulated anyone who came in her path who was against what she wanted to do. And obviously we're going to share stuff, but she convinced Charles to basically
join in her dirty work.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to get started. So, okay. We're pretty removed from high school and college. It's safe to say it's been a hot minute since we were sitting at a desk. But I do remember in psychology learning about narcissistic behavior. And so we did a little research today and just to get some definitions. And I think I found one that perfectly describes Lori. It is called the malignant narcissist. So let's talk about those traits. An absence of conscious psychological need for power, a sense of importance or grandeur. Now, I think that probably is a scratch on the surface of the things that may be affecting Lori Vallow, but the one thing that kind of grabbed my attention was the need for importance or grandeur, and I think we kind of know who filled that need.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, we can thank Chad for feeding into that, and that's why we may be where we are today, or part of the reason. But man, I was just so shocked at the level of ruthlessness, I think is the word, when we were looking over these papers today.
Yeah, it's like she's a tornado, and anything that gets in her path, she just chews it up and spits it out.
Yeah, including the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Kay and Larry and Annie have all said, at some point that she was really a good mom to these kids, and didn't seem, I think she obviously said some off-the-wall things as the years progressed, but nothing that ever really made anybody feel the need to intervene with the kids, at least until they couldn't, hear from them in November last year.
Yeah, and we've said this from the beginning, that she's a chameleon, and she will hide, and she can survive in any environment because she can alter, conversations and just how she acts to make people think she's one way, and then she's truly something else. So
yeah, and in these papers we've seen examples of how she may try to use words to convince other people to feel a certain way. In this case about Joseph Ryan, we're talking about counselors, by sort of telling them to watch out for him. He's very charming, and I mean, that's just very manipulative and calculated, I think, to make him look bad before he even sits down with the counselor. But we're going to jump in right now.
Yeah, so looking at the beginning, Joseph Ryan, they come right out and say that his scores indicate no to low interest in violence and or predator-like behavior.
Mm-hmm. Which is important because if you remember, there have been accusations of sexual abuse to the Colby and Tylee, early on by Lori and later on by Colby publicly. And we don't doubt any kind of accusation until there's reason to. We're just kind of reporting on what was said in this here, and we're just going to tell you what the various professionals, their opinions on this were.
Yeah, and they say, Joseph came in, appeared relaxed, focused, cooperative, well-mannered. I mean, he lacked the observable indicators of slick and a sociopath. Miss Vallow, Lori Vallow, had voiced to the examiner great concern on a number of occasions that her ex-husband would use charm and tricks, and trying to win the examiner's favor. So this is, again, just shows, her being a chameleon, her trying to convince the examiner, who's a professional who does this for a living, and they read body language. They know what they see and how to read how someone is portraying themselves in an interview. That's their job.
Right, yeah. That's why they have a PhD or a doctorate and get paid the big bucks, is because they probably know within 2 minutes of starting evaluations maybe if this person is genuine or if they're trying to deceive the person conducting the interview.
Exactly. And at no time he wasn't aggressive. He verbalized great frustration during the first 4 years of accusations, and this is going on like for years.
Yeah, it's insane. They spent, I know at one point in the documents, Joseph Ryan said that he had spent himself over $75,000 litigating the custody issue with Tylee.
Exactly.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and in reading these documents, it'll come in again at another point, but Tylee really didn't know he was her dad.
Yeah.
Like he was her biological father.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just crazy stuff.
And I think it's important to note here, these documents that we have right now, Wicked Truth and F-Bombs have dumped all the documents today. We have not had a chance to go through them yet. We're going to subscribe to their service to be able to look at these documents. I mean, they're beneficial to us, and they certainly need to, have our support in what they've done to get these documents. But these go back to, Tylee was born in 2002. The custody dispute started in 2003. So this has already been going on at the point of the documents we have here for 4 years.
Yeah, there must have been some separation in there. The divorce was filed in August of 2004, and it was finalized in May of 2005. In looking at all this, we wanted to touch base a little bit on alienation of affection, and I know you've seen that in situations.
I have, and so alienation of affection can be used in many ways in arguments in court, but in this case, they're talking about alienating a child from a parent. And so essentially they're programming their child to target the other parent, to undermine and interfere with the child's relationship with the other parent, which is essentially a form of brainwashing. They drop little things and repeat those things until it sort of becomes familiar to the child, and especially with really young kids, they have a tendency to repeat what they've heard.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. It's your child. And you got to look at the reasoning behind it. Why was she doing that?
Yeah, well, I think for her, when she divorced Joseph, she wanted to do her own thing, and it didn't include Joseph. And I don't think she wanted to be tied in Texas. He lived in Tyler, Texas. This is where all of this litigation took place. So
yeah, it was like Travis County, right?
Yeah, or Travis, Texas. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm thinking Tyler. But the alienation of affection, what parents don't realize, and I think a lot of times parents don't realize they're doing it in a mild way during a divorce, but there are extreme cases of alienation of affection, and I mean, to say that happened in this case is putting it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, what she tried to get, Colby to say and Tylee to say, and I mean, we're going to see later where, she was getting them to lie, basically.
Yeah, and it's actually considered a form of severe emotional abuse to the child. Courts don't like to see this happening because you're just damaging your kid at a very young age. But it can include getting kids to go on little secret missions in the non-custodial parent's house, things like that. I've seen it. where they may have the kid go in and look for financial documents. Or in this case, Lori had Tylee at, I believe, 6 years old, taking pictures of Joseph Ryan's bathroom.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And in the end, it's the kid who's hurt.
Right. Yeah. The kid don't know where to turn. I mean, it's because kids tend to trust their mothers, especially a custodial mother that has that kid probably more than 80% of the time. And you just plant those seeds until they start to grow. And you could see where the guardian was really, I thought, on top of what was happening. But even in just today reading these documents, I'm dumbfounded at how nothing was done.
Yeah, every so many weeks we discuss who dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And when these documents came out, we were like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back to when Tylee was just little.
Tiny.
That this stuff you read through this stuff and it's like, how in the world did Lori still have her?
No, I mean, we'll get into it. There were times where a guardian wanted to put her in foster care until this got resolved. But they decided
she avoided it again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. She is like Teflon Don. I mean, she has weaseled her way. I don't know how so many hearings that happened in this case. I would love to know exactly how many hearings there were. But at no point did anybody just stand up and say, this kid needs a stable environment until these parents, mainly Lori it seemed, can do what's best for the kid.
Yeah.
Or let the court decide what's best for the kids. There's so much, as far as this case goes, where there's been drop balls. I'm not even surprised anymore. It's kind of sad to read, but I'm not surprised anymore.
Exactly. And, looking, some of the questions they ask is, does the mom show signs of medical histories, paranoia, borderline personality? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, like we're seeing it in 2019, 2020. And we're like, yes, she does.
Yeah, they just go on and on. There's a lot of questions here where they're asking about, does there appear to be a pattern of moving the child from professional to professional or taking the child repeatedly to the same professional in an effort to get a statement that no one has heard but the confederate being Lori? That's a legal term for like a mother or a matriarch. And the answer is yes. And we know just recently some people came out that knew Tylee and said, this kid, she was a victim of Munchausen by proxy syndrome, where Lori would take her to the hospital repeatedly for stomach pains at 9 years old, I believe, saying that they thought she had pancreatitis. But from what we found, they never were able to diagnose her with something definite. And it just sort of follows the pattern we've seen with Lori and the need for attention and things like that. So I don't think Tylee ever had a normal, at what point did this poor kid have a normal childhood?
Yeah, I don't see it. I mean, it's...
Seems like she was a pawn in her mom's chess game.
Yeah. And you see, here's Joseph Ryan, who, the emails we've seen, back and forth, and he truly cared for her. And it's kind of sad to see him go through all this when he was just trying to look out for his daughter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the situation. I don't know Joseph Ryan, but I'll say... there were allegations made, but from these papers, it really seems like Joseph would have been the best custodial parent. Obviously, I mean, Tylee's deceased by the hand of her mother in one way or another.
Yes. So then you get into some of the questions, has a child made a statement to any skilled or trained professional that she has not been sexually abused of great import, made a statement to that professional that he or she is being coached? And the answer there is yes.
That is huge.
Yeah.
That is a big red flag.
I can honestly, I worked and served civil documents, and they would tell us, if you want to know the truth, ask a kid, because a kid is not going to lie.
Oh, they don't lie.
No. So these questions she's being asked, she's truthfully answering them, and it's shocking to see. That's a yes to that question. Yeah, I mean, even down to she couldn't tell when Joseph was mentioned, do you know who he is? She would say that was her old daddy. Yeah, like where does that term come from?
Well, it comes from mom.
Like,
That's a mom term.
I mean, who makes that? How does a kid make that up? That's my old daddy.
He's your old daddy, and
at this age, kids are tape recorders. They say anything and everything they hear.
Oh yeah.
So some of the bigger stuff, and it talks about that. Who is Joe? And her answer is my old daddy. Charles is her new daddy. Has Joe ever hurt or injured you? Her answer was no.
Repeated her answer, no.
Yeah. She confirmed that no, Daddy Joe didn't hurt her. So, here you have one instance, her saying that she was sexually abused. And then she turns around and answers these questions, and they're all opposite of what, she had been asked. So,
yeah, it's just this poor kid was emotionally abused really from the time she was 1 year old.
Yeah. I mean, coaching a child to answer something that, eventually she knew Joe was her father, because eventually that comes out, because she goes and stays with him and stuff like that. So, seeing those answers, that's got to be heartbreaking for her, that eventually she has to realize, oh, my mom's making me lie. Eventually she would know that.
Mm-hmm. And she even says here that when they ask her, who asked you to come here and talk about Daddy Joe, the examiner said, has anybody told you or made you come here today? And she said yes, and it was Colby and Charles.
Yeah. And, seeing Charles come into this and this light and in these documents, again, we see that Lori uses people and manipulates people to do her dirty work.
Yeah, I've never gotten the sense that Charles was a villain in all this. I think that he and Joseph were just victims of Lori.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, when you're married to somebody and they've been married before, and you hear the one-sided story of how that marriage went, how that person was, you're going to be on their side. You're sharing your home. You're raising that kid. And then you think about Kay and Larry, who have echoed in the past that Lori was the perfect mom, but they only knew what they were told.
Sure.
By Charles. And I don't think Kay would have any reason to doubt Charles. And so, Joseph was probably made the villain for a million reasons. One, obviously, to benefit Lori, but just probably to get Charles on board, because this was not a cheap battle to fight.
No.
And Charles was able to facilitate that. And he told Joe in emails, I've been through it with my ex-wife. We will make sure she has what she needs at her disposal to fight you. And that's what any husband would do when they think that the child is in danger.
Exactly. And what does she get if she keeps Tylee? There's going to be money coming in.
Exactly. Child support.
Exactly. So some other stuff in this, when the child made these statements, so when Tylee made these statements, the mother's jaw dropped, eyes widened, and appeared shocked. She did not seem fearful that she was in trouble. Rather, she seemed in disbelief and shock. The mother, who is Lori Vallow, has explained this is the lady writing, explained to me on many occasions that she speaks with her deceased sister and believes that Tylee is her reincarnation of her sister. So this is 2007. And we're seeing those thoughts and those beliefs. Right.
And, I never really would have expected that far back that she was considered, in reincarnation, that Tylee's her sister. One thing we forgot to mention that's very new that just came out is they are now officially investigating Joseph's death.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's really big news, because I'm not a lawyer. But I would think if they've reopened that investigation officially, they may have something that would lead them to believe that it was foul play. He's been cremated.
Yeah, but they did state that they had taken tissue samples and stuff and kept those.
And, right. And more importantly, if they have digital evidence, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And we know there's a ton of digital evidence in this case. They didn't hide anything.
Yeah, they did everything but spray paint their names at every crime scene.
Exactly.
Lori was here.
So next you look at some recommendations. So some of the plans and everything set about an immediate plan now where the child may meet and understand that her real daddy is Joseph Ryan and Charles Vallow. So they're discussing here how to fix. They're trying to fix the situation for her.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, look, when a parent remarries, it should, in a perfect world, it should be that the child feels free to love the biological parent they don't live with, as well as the new step parent. And that's what's healthy for the kid. That's your job as a parent, is to make sure your kids are free to love without any hesitation. But
yeah. I mean, she could be loved double.
Right. That's what I've always said, is double the love.
Yeah, and you hear it all the time that parents have to get along for the kids, because that's truly who's harmed in this situation when they don't. And when parents start using a kid as a pawn in getting what they want, or making the other one feel bad or whatever, it's not the parents that get hurt.
No, it's not. It's a power move.
Yeah.
But I thought it was big, too, that one of the recommendations was to instruct the biological mother to cease any and all communication and chats with this child about Daddy Joe being a molester. And they wanted her to submit successfully complete a psychiatric and psychosexual examination. And she should have supervised visits until this case can be more clearly understood. So
wow.
This is not a judge's order. This is a recommendation. So a guardian ad litem in family court, they are the advocate and the voice of the child. Now, at this point, Tylee is 5 years old, 2007. So she was born in 2000, around 5 years old.
Yep.
And the recommendation from the guardian who comes into your home and spends time with your family, and they talk to the parents individually, and then they talk to the children alone. And they're able to fish out things out of them, even if the kids have been coached. Guardian ad litems are used to kind of breaking down that wall and be able to get the answer they need to make their assessments. And I think it's huge that in 2007, the guardian says Lori needs to have supervised visits with this kid.
Yeah.
A recommendation doesn't mean a judge does it. And I don't know how that played out, who made the decision not to go for supervised visitation. But a guardian ad litem has no dog in the fight other than the kid. They get paid a salary, they are assigned kids, and they are an advocate. For a guardian to say this, that is a big deal.
Yeah, and she's pushing for Joe to have a relationship with his daughter. I mean, she's recommending that she be with her father for long times to rehabilitate that relationship. And the emotional trauma that this has, put Tylee through to rebuild that. And so she knows who her dad is.
Right. And at 5 years old, look, I mean, long-term memories are not plentiful down the road, but it can embed things into a child's brain and their well-being. I mean, some of the long-term effects of alienation of affection is depression. You have low self-esteem, a lack of trust. They have major trust issues because what happens too is sometimes when you're a teenager or young adult and you look back at the things that your parent did, you start to realize that they were dishonest with you and they used you. And so trust issues are a big deal of kids that are victims of alienation of affection.
Yeah. And I thought it was big that they wanted her to have contact with his family. So I thought that was big. One of the other things here that I thought stood out was talking about Colby, that he was the key to understanding the problems in this case. So Colby is around 12 at this time, or close to it. So, it's he knows, like he was old enough to know what was being said and what was going on. So I thought that was pretty big in this area.
Yeah, and in these documents, there were some emails that were exchanged between Lori and Joseph and Charles. And, it kind of is your typical custody battle. We're going to fight you on this thing. At one point, Joseph Ryan apparently had been late with some child support payments, which I could see why if he's spending, $75,000, almost $100,000 on legal fees. But what you can't do in that situation is withhold visitation. That is against a court order. They will bring a parent in that's non-compliant with that, and Sometimes they can go to jail for non-payment. They're in contempt. And just like Lori was in contempt for not bringing her kids, you can be in contempt for not paying your child support. But you're not supposed to withhold visitation. That's a big no-no. And the judge, it doesn't matter how late they are. I mean, if they haven't issued an order for a deadline to pay it or have put them in jail, you cannot modify a visitation schedule because you think they owe you something, even if they do.
Yeah.
So
because in the end, that hurts the kid.
It really does. And so for Lori, it was about the money, and she didn't care that Tylee have regular visits that are continual and normal. It's, if you don't pay me, you're not going to see your kids. Kind of like holding your kid hostage, essentially.
Yeah.
But we see she loves money, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And in talking about that, some of these emails you see, Joseph here saying child support and visitation are clearly separate issues, and you and Charles do not have the right to mix them together or deny me access to our daughter. So I thought that was a good point on his part, that they are separate issues.
They really are. And the court sees them as separate issues. Lori probably wouldn't have gotten far if she had taken that to court. The other thing I thought that I caught was that it seems maybe Joseph points out in one of the emails that he wanted to raise her with Christian principles. So I wonder, too, if religion played a little bit of part in the hostility where Lori technically was LDS, but even back then seems like she had started going off the rails into some other kind of offshoot. But he said a couple of times in these emails that he wanted to raise her with Christian principles, and we know religion is at the center of this whole mess.
Yeah, yeah.
Right in the middle.
Yeah.
These next ones jump up to 2008.
Yeah. We're
a year later, nearly a year later.
And we're still in court fighting. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and it's emotional. It's emotionally draining because what it is, it seems like for years, Lori was consumed with getting Joseph out of Tylee's life. That is a 24/7 thing almost.
Yeah, and like you said, is it because they want to be able to move and go wherever they want? Because we know eventually they pick up and go to Hawaii, and they're living in all these other places. So one of the emails that stood out to me was Joe's talking, and he's emailing Lori, and he kind of mentions that Charles was behind on some child support stuff and other payments and whatever, and he says, I have Tylee covered for medical and dental on his policy. So he lists like those policy numbers. And then he talks about, Tylee and I had a great visit with lots of pictures and videos from both the days that he had her. And it was just kind of cool to see that relationship. She was having a good time. He mentions Colby and says, Colby, I'm sure all the moving and transient stuff is very hard on him. So he's very just reaching out in this email and, trying to help. And his last thing that he says is, she is a beautiful little girl, and I just want you to know that I will always love you as her mother. So he's reaching out, making sure Tylee has what she needs, medical-wise and dental-wise. Mm-hmm. And he understood that these court costs were racking up and expensive.
Right, and that's just money you could be putting away for the kid. I mean, if you look at how much money people spend duking it out in family court, I mean, if you guys could just be adults about the kid that you created and move on and do what's best for the kid, all these tens of thousands of dollars, $75,000 could have been Tylee's college fund and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, that's a ton of money.
Yep.
So we jump ahead to one of the Guardian Ad Litem documents, and it talks about meeting with Tylee, that her health has improved. This is still in 2008, July of 2008, that her health has improved and she seems to be doing well. The therapist has raised concerns about the level of trauma Tylee experienced in the hospital and the stress she has continually experienced throughout this conflict.
Right. So not only do you have a custody battle that they're pulling her into and influence her on, she has these medical conditions that I wouldn't doubt were sort of created by Lori. And so she's getting poked and prodded when she's not being put in the middle of that.
Yeah. But she's happy. I mean, the Guardian Ad Litem says she's happy with her visits with her father.
But one very telling thing on this document, it says that this was, they're talking about July 1st, 2008 on this document. Visitation treatment issues and clinical concerns were discussed. And at that time, there were concerns raised regarding Lori misrepresenting information, primarily regarding Tylee's medical intake form.
Who does that?
Well, crazy women who have Munchausen.
Oh.
But that's a kind of a classic symptom that probably making symptoms seem, if she even had a symptom, making them seem worse than they were, or making them seem bigger, so that treating her daughter probably seemed like much more urgent than if she just said, oh yeah, well, we'll do some tests at home. When you're fudging medical conditions on your daughter, it's just, most doctors don't assume parents do that. So it probably started off a ton of tests on this poor kid.
Yeah.
And we've seen pictures of her as a teenager in the hospital.
Yeah. They, a friend of theirs released them a few weeks ago.
So I'd be curious to know how long Tylee was in and out of the hospital for conditions where we've never heard of any kind of a diagnosis for her.
Yeah. You know, in this same document, it talks about, she tells the guardian ad litem that she's scared about overnights. And when she asked her about it, she said something like, because Joe molested me and Colby. So here again, you see the teeter-totter yo-yo.
Mm-hmm.
She loves spending time with her dad. She's having a good time. Now she's coming back to this end of, you know, the molestation part. And, you know, when Tylee's mother came into the session towards the end, Miss Smith reports that Tylee looked at her mother and said, I told her.
So probably the whole way there, her mom saying, now don't forget to tell her that Joseph molested you and Colby.
Yeah. And when have we seen that? You know, in looking when Charles was shot and killed, Tylee was with her mom to take JJ to school and back. You wonder, is that continuing there?
Yeah, there's no telling.
Yeah.
So here in July 3rd, 2008, Tylee tells Dr. Wilcox that that the molestation happened when she was 4 years old. Then when the doctor asked her if she ever saw her dad alone when she was 4, Tylee said, no, that's not right. It wasn't last year. It was 4 years ago when she was 1.
Okay, what child remembers what happened to them at 1?
I don't know of any. And that should have been a huge red flag to these people.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating that they have all this evidence. This is court documents. All this evidence, and still falls through the cracks.
Yeah, just completely falls through the cracks. But, you know, then these are guardian ad litem like session reports. So they go, I believe it was the day after she had spent the night or the weekend with Joe, which I think sometimes was actually with a guardian or a court-appointed person overnighting the visits with them. At one point, they had motion detectors set up in the hallway to make sure, because of the allegations, that Joseph wasn't leaving his room or anything like that. And Tylee had told them that when they were talking about her being molested, she said Tylee became tearful and said she didn't want to talk about it around Joe because maybe it wasn't true.
Yeah, she's just a little kid.
Yeah.
And she knows what she's saying is not true.
Yeah. And there was one time, too, where Tylee reported seeing needles in Joe's bathroom.
Yeah, and then I think somewhere else in the documents it talks about she was taking pictures of the bathroom.
Yeah, I mean, Lori had sent her there with a cell phone camera and had told her to take pictures of Joe's bathroom.
Yeah, yep. So it's just like one thing after the other. So we jump over to this next guardian ad litem. I was appointed by Judge Dietz as the second guardian ad litem for Tylee in the midst of this highly dramatic and emotional custody suit in late July of 2007. It's here's a second guardian ad litem, and Joe in the hearings he requested a jury trial.
I tell you, that's a man who's confident in him being wronged. If you're willing to go in front of a jury when you've been accused of molesting 2 kids, you're pretty confident that you're not going to be found.
Yeah, you're not going to be found wrong. You're going to be right on.
Yeah, I always say if somebody requests a jury trial, either they're really brazen and very cocky as a guilty person, or you're innocent.
Yeah. And we see here that Tylee is now 6. She's been diagnosed with pancreatitis. She's having had 2 episodes requiring hospitalization between February of 2008 and now. And you see that this has affected her.
Yeah.
This has affected her. During the summer of 2008, the guardian ad litem began asking the court to appoint an attorney for Tylee.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I'm going to tell you, when a guardian says that they are not capable of representing this child due to the fact that it's so nasty, and they ask for an attorney to be appointed, that is kind of, I have not heard of that a lot, and I know a lot of people that have had guardians.
Yeah, and I think we see here that neither parent would pay for her for the services for the attorney, so the court allowed her to be dismissed in December 2008. And they see that there's been a horrific amount of debt during all this court stuff and all this litigation. So the guardian ad litem, the role does not include the ability to file motions or ask pertinent questions regarding the best interest of the child. So I believe that Tylee's emotional well-being has not been fully examined or explained to the court. So what they're saying is the guardian ad litem does not have the right to subpoena witnesses, question witnesses, or fully advocate. And here she's asking the court to consider relieving the current guardian ad litem role and appoint a skilled family law attorney experienced in representing children to represent Tylee. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's big. I mean, because I think this guardian understood, because you have to remember, this guardian's already made recommendations that Lori be supervised with Tylee. And clearly none of this stuff is happening. And so the guardian might be in a situation where she sees this as a cycle. Yeah. I mean, just a circle. I know there were a ton of hearings. It seems like there had to have been daily contact with lawyers. And so the guardian knows at this point, this is almost above. She just needs somebody to look for Tylee's legal rights.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's clear at this point, nobody's looking after her emotional rights. So the best thing you can do then is just make sure she's not in a situation that lawfully she could be taken out of.
Yeah, and you see, like, it's over and over that Tylee had fun with her dad. Tylee liked spending time with her dad.
Yeah.
And he's just continuing to fight for her.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're at a good stopping point. These documents are so long, and there's so much in them. If we stop here and can pick up and do like a second session continuing this, there's so much information here.
There's too much. I mean, we've read over them kind of off and on all day, and every time I look down, I see something new. And not to mention, there's 1,700 other pages that we haven't even touched yet. I can't imagine what's in those.
Yeah, I'm just a shout out to the ladies from
Wicked Truths and F-Bombs.
Yeah, that's awesome work. We appreciate it so much. And like we said, we're going to just start getting through this and giving you this information. It's hard to catch it on social media because you may miss it if you miss a post.
Oh, yeah, they roll by fast.
Yeah, it's so much information on all these pages. So us being able to break it down and kind of, give you a summary of what's being said and all, we hope this helps.
Well, I think it helps sort of understand the dynamics of way before Chad Daybell, which is clear that there was just some major problems. There were some major emotional and mental problems with Lori, and poor Tylee.
Yeah,
she was just a power piece for Lori, I feel.
Yeah, and we've both been around people who, when everything's going good, they're fine and their behavior's fine, and we're not taking anything away from Annie or Kay and Larry and all those people who said, oh, she was amazing. They don't know, they don't live with her, so when things are going fine, people like that are okay.
Right, but there's a reason, I think, that was probably vindictive motivated and money motivated as to why she didn't want Joseph to have any contact with Tylee.
Yeah.
But and also on that same note, we do want to say too, we're not diminishing Colby's claims. We do not know Joseph Ryan. We do not know any of these players.
Yeah, we're just looking at the evidence.
And in these reports, we're just reading what they say, and there seems to be some doubt.
Yeah.
That maybe both these kids might have been coached, but again, we're not saying that we feel Colby was dishonest in his interview that he gave about his experience as a child.
Yeah, he's been a victim in all this as well.
Right, and our hearts have always gone out to Colby, Kay, Larry, Annie, everybody. But we're going to keep diving into this. News, like we had said before, news is going to slow way down. We've got some preliminaries coming up in a few weeks. That'll be very enlightening. We'll probably see some more evidence that they have on Lori and Chad both. But in the meantime, probably not a whole lot happening. I totally predict Melanie Podolowski's going to maybe get arrested before she has her baby. I don't know. I just have a gut feeling. When she was finally named in Brandon's custody paperwork of his own, he did say she was a person of interest in that, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, real quick, we had a lady ask us about the malachite poisoning or the malachite rings, and we researched that, and that's a dangerous thing to work with. One of the cases that I looked at, a gentleman was working with it and started to feel ill, couldn't breathe, these things. He was struggling, and he was working with malachite. So what we found out, to even work with that stuff, you had to be masked, with a ventilator, a mask, just gloves. You didn't want to really handle it. And people who have it like as a sink or a bathtub or whatever, it's coated really well, so you don't really get to the
like the raw element of it.
Yeah. So we wanted to give a shout out to her, and I can't remember her name.
Yeah, we'll have to look it up.
We're sorry. We've just been taking in all this information, and it just slipped my mind. And I wanted to mention it because you had asked us to look into it. So,
but also one of the things we learned too was the daily wear. It absorbs negative energy, and it guards against pollution. It protects against accidents, and it relieves fears.
Yeah, it was really weird. If you look it up and read on it, what people believe this thing does, it's copper. That's where the toxicity comes in, is the copper. And our body has some copper in it, but it exits our body. But that's the part that harms you is the copper level in that. So
interesting. Why is this the choice for the wedding rings that they bought before
it's
Charles died?
It's just really weird. If you look at the meaning behind it, it's like starting a new life and being stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure by now with all the rings and everything done, I would think that the coroners and medical examiners, they're testing for that. And
oh yeah, I just want to correct myself. I just said before Charles died. It was before Tammy died that they bought the rings right before. Yep. Isn't that right?
Yep.
It's just so many deaths and just so much shady stuff that happens before the deaths. So I just get everybody
loops together.
We're really waiting on Tammy Daybell's autopsy. I feel like they found something.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. They released Alex's pretty quick, and they didn't find anything.
But they haven't closed that investigation either.
It's still open, and I think some of that evidence came out after that. So who knows if they went back and checked for different things in the blood or.
So I think the biggest things we're waiting on now are the upgraded charges to murder, homicide, conspiracy, whatever they're going to get them with.
Yeah, and we know that's not coming until the medical examiner rules the cause of death.
Right. So a cause of death will probably be the next thing we hear regarding kids.
Yep.
And then we've got Tammy's autopsy we're waiting on. Alex's investigation into his death is still not finished. If they find evidence digitally, then it doesn't matter. I mean, Nate has said, even if Tammy Daybell's autopsy comes back as natural, they may have enough digital evidence to charge them regardless. Yeah. So I don't expect any easy close to any of these deaths. I think that they're looking in every angle, but Melanie Podolowski, I think, is in very big danger of being arrested soon, and we got the preliminaries coming up. But in the meantime, when there's no news, we're going to focus on this mountain of custody papers and try to break them down for you. And just we're reading all of it, And we're really hitting the best parts because it would take a week probably to go through these.
Yeah, we probably have 50 pages sitting in front of us right now.
We're going to probably use about 3 trees in copy paper printing this stuff out.
Yeah, but we don't want you guys to miss anything. So.
Yeah, so we're going to break it up. And but that's all we have for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Give us a shout out on Twitter. We're on Facebook now, so look us up. And we will talk to you guys later.
Good night.